Adrian Łapczyński, EpicVR, LUďNO O VR. Dziś po raz kolejny poruszymy sprawę gogli Apple Vision Pro, które, jak mam nadzieję, ja i cała branża będą przełomem dla technologii Mixed Reality. Zapraszam. Na moim ulubionym portalu LUďNO O VR natrafiłem na ciekawy artykuł, w którym założyciel Oculusa, Palmer Luckey, wypowiada się na temat potencjału i możliwości gogli Apple Vision Pro. Dla przypomnienia dodam tylko, że Palmer Luckey jest opisywany w źródłach historycznych jako osoba, która stworzyła pierwsze gogle wirtualnej rzeczywistości. Działo się to między rokiem 2011 a 2013. Później jego firma została przejęta podobno za gigantyczną kwotę sięgającą 2 lub 3 miliardów dolarów, źródła historyczne różnie podają, została wchłonięta przez Facebooka. I co ciekawe, Palmer Luckey był przeciwny temu ruchowi, ponieważ spodziewał się, że Facebook wymusi na użytkownikach logowanie się do gogli VR-owych kontem Facebook. I rzeczywiście Mark Zuckerberg zaprzeczał tym informacjom, natomiast pojawiła się taka konieczność w roku 2015-16, kiedy trzeba było powiązać swoje konta facebookowe, właśnie swoje konta oculusowe właśnie z Facebookiem. Ale wracając do tematu, zachęcam do obejrzenia tego, co twórca gogli Oculus, Palmer Luckey, ma do powiedzenia właśnie w temacie Apple Vision Pro.
A couple weeks ago, finally, Apple debuts Vision Pro.
That's right.
You had tried the headset before at an earlier stage, and then
Well, I talked about that in abundance, and
You
then
did.
everybody dug up my comments, which they had to kind of miss the first time, and then everyone was digging it up because I guess apparently I'm one of the only people who's willing to say something.
So, did you see the debut as well?
Oh, of course.
Good. And what up? What do you think?
Hey,
Did they nail it?
I think that there's things that I would do differently if I were Apple, but
What did they do right?
that's what I was gonna say. They did basically everything right. They didn't do anything terrible. I mean, I think Apple's going after the exact right segment of the market that Apple should be going after. So the thing you have to remember is different companies, I think, have different products that are right for them to be building. I think if Apple had tried to go after the low end of the market, that would have been a mistake. They are taking the exact approach that I had always wanted Apple to take, and really the approach that Oculus had been taking in the early years. You know, I actually when Apple launched the Vision Pro, I retweeted a tweet of my own from 2015 where I said that before VR can become something that everyone can afford, it must become something that everybody wants. And I think that's the approach Apple is taking. You know, they're trying to go balls to the wall, the highest possible resolution, the highest quality possible displays, the best possible ergonomics, and they're going all in on that with little regard for it being affordable for everyone.
Sure.
And I think that is actually the right approach for Apple to take right now. That approach will change. Obviously, they're going to do a cheaper version in the future. It boils my mind when you have all of these pundits coming out and saying, this is a blunder, it'll never go anywhere. Who the heck is going to spend $3,500?
A lot of people.
That's the real secret. There's a lot of people who are going to spend it. But more importantly, there's 100 times more people who are going to spend a quarter of that when it gets to that to that price. That's really where you need to be looking at this. The price right now, it's kind of irrelevant. The people who are going to buy it at $3,500, we would have bought it at $5,000. We would have bought it at $2,000. The price just doesn't matter for the group of early adopters that they're targeting. But what they're going to do is inspire lust in a much larger group of people who, as I dreamed all those years ago, see VR as something they desperately want before it becomes something they can afford.
Yeah. People have to desire it. I had this experience when I was trying to price my zero-G flights. You know, I wanted to get the price below 2,000, couldn't get there originally, and I had it at 3,500, and then realized that the same number of people would pay 5,000 or 7,500 bucks.
Yep.
And, you know, having a viable company and product that people aspire to is super valuable. And then eventually get the price down, as we always do. What are the features that you think are the most important that surprised you in the Vision Pro?
Oh man, let me see. Things that are surprising. I don't want to sound arrogant here, but most of the things are just things that I totally expect.
You've been,
what they're doing. When I say they're doing it right, they're doing things that people have talked about as the right thing to do for a very, very long time.
I mean, I found
one of the things. Okay, one thing I'm surprised on a little bit is that Apple did go for having the external puck tethered to the headset. To be clear, that is the right way to do things. And I was a big advocate of this in Oculus. Unfortunately, it was a battle that I lost in my waning years. Mm-hmm. And they went all in on putting all the batteries, putting all the processing in the actual headset itself. And not just in the headset, but in the front of the headset itself, which hugely increases the weight of the front of the device and the asymmetric torque load. And it's not a good decision. The fact that Apple did that was something I was afraid they wouldn't do, because it does look less cool than having it all in one kind of magical thing that you just put on your head.
Yep.
But getting the weight off of your head is so important, especially for the future. I think the real reason Apple got the battery off of the head is not because this device couldn't have had a battery on, let's say, the back of the headset and been fine. It's because they're setting that expectation in people that it's okay to have it off of the head, so that in the future they can add more processing, that they can add more radios, they can add more batteries to an external puck rather than keeping it in the headset, because that's what's going to allow the Apple device to become basically, a thin pair of glasses. As long as you're keeping all your processing and all of your battery and power in the headset, there's a limit to how small it can be. And that limit is somewhere around the size of VR headsets that you kind of see today.
So take me there. Where is this going? I mean, what would you not be surprised by a decade from now? What's VR look like?
Well, you're going to see a huge number of people that are wearing headsets used for AR and VR every single day. Yeah. They're going to be using it continuously to blend the real world and the digital world seamlessly. They'll be going between the two frequently, sending data between the two frequently, communicating with people who exist across both of those two planes continuously. And I think that we're likely to spend more of our waking moments with our reality augmented or augmediated or whatever you want to call it. There's a million philosophical distinctions. I think we're going to spend more time looking at that augmented view than an unaugmented view.
So living in the virtual and augmented world. And do you think the headsets will get down to a pair of sunglasses? Here's the thing. I think that the headsets can get down to a pair of sunglasses. I don't think they will. The reason for that is that you have to make certain trade-offs that get more and more extreme as you get to the far end of what you can do in terms of making a lightweight headset. I'd say think more kind of chunky sunglasses is probably where things are going. But when people say, is it ever going to get to, this thin pair of glasses? I say, you know what? It's possible to make a virtual reality headset or an AR headset within the laws of physics that fits in that form factor. But the quality of that experience is going to be so much worse than something just a little bit bigger that I think most people will opt for the thing that is a little bit bigger and a radically better experience. The real key here is a changing of social expectations. I mentioned this in abundance. Yeah.
The real way Apple is going to make their headset cool and acceptable to wear in public is not through engineering. It's still pretty big.
Social engineering.
It's social engineering.
Yeah.
It's marketing. They're going to put it on the heads of the right celebrities. Yeah. They're going to put it on the heads of the right influencers. And just like that, boom, something that was lame will become cool. And it doesn't have to get any thinner or lighter to do that.
Will.i.am was at A360 speaking this year, and he wears these very large red glasses that could be a VR. Could be a VR.
Lady Gaga did the same thing. Yeah. She really kicked off a trend a few years ago of wearing huge, oversized sunglasses that are way too big for reason.
Getting ready.
And that made it cool. I think Apple's going to do the exact same thing. They're going to make the big thing cool. And so by the time we have the chunky sunglasses, I think we're going to be well past the question of will people wear on this. People will look back on this discussion as a quaint relic. They'll say, man, can you believe there were people who really thought that nobody would ever dare wear VR or AR glasses in public? It's just, it's going to be, it's going to seem bizarre to the young kids.
The social analogy is I remember the first time I watched people with earbuds walking around the street talking to themselves. And it seemed just weird.
Yep.
And now it's totally socially acceptable.
Oh, I mean, you can go back even further. People thought it was nuts when people were walking around with cell phones, even just talking on them. You know, the idea that you would just be out in public using a piece of, office telecommunications hardware seemed pretty bizarre. But now it's totally taken for granted. You literally would not even, not only would you not think twice when you see it on the street, you don't even think about it.
Yeah, it's fully accepted. I remember Tom Furness at the Human Interface Lab up in Seattle.
Yep.
Had a vision of what he called the virtual retinal displays, where literally you would raster scan
Yep.
with the laser across the back of the retina as a way to shrink
Virtual
things
retinal
down.
display that doesn't form
VRDs.
any image plane except on the retina.
Yeah. So are those possible?
They're possible. It's one path to the future. It's not the one that I'm betting on. I think we're just going to keep brute forcing it through higher and higher pixel density on relatively traditional silicon process displays and micro displays. I could be wrong there. That the thing that people don't quite understand about VRDs, these retinal displays, is that you still have to project onto your eye from a wide angle. So a lot of people imagine that VRDs can, from a small lens, project a large field of view. That's not possible with any reasonable permutation of the technology. It could change in a few decades, but for now, any VRD with wide field of view needs to also have a large lens that is going over your eye.
Until we bypass and go directly to the cortex.
Until we go bypass and go directly into the brain, which I'll be honest, I'm cynical about. I think we're gonna.
You haven't signed up yet?
So I'm a big believer in BCI for like arbitrary data transfer. So basically like psychic power levels of augmentation.
Think in Google.
Yeah, and that and also knowing directions, having random data input from different systems, reaching out and controlling things. But when it comes to replacing the visual system, I think it's extraordinarily hard to get a BCI with the particular type of bandwidth that we need to do that sufficiently well. I think it's more likely that we are just using glasses. I see a future where we have near perfect brain to computer interfaces for controlling our computers. We're still going to be wearing head mounted displays. That's my opinion.
And what are we doing with our hands? So what do you think about the hand gestures and lack of haptics? And where do you think haptics are going to go?
Well, it's no secret that I'm a big fan of VR input. I think that's probably one of the things I would have done differently than Apple. On the other hand, they have a plan for VR input that goes beyond just the finger inputs. I think they're taking a focused marketing approach, but I think they have a broader vision for the future than everything just being eyes and fingers. So I'm a big fan of haptic input. I'm a big fan of haptic props. I'm a big fan of especially finger-held tools that allow you to do high precision interactions that you simply cannot do with your eyes or with the binary inputs of touching fingers. But
do we have a lot of room to grow there in haptics?
There's a ton of room to grow, a lot of room to grow, a lot of room to specialize. What I like to use as an analogy is the keyboard. Looking at things and touching your fingers, that's a human interface. But a keyboard is a superhuman interface. It allows you to do things faster and better than you could do them with your voice, than you could do it even with your eyes. And a mouse is also, to some degree, a superhuman interface. These are things that require a lot of training to use. They're not natural. Like keyboards are not natural. You'd probably agree.
Especially the QWERTY.
They take a long time to learn. But the QWERTY, that's a whole separate mess. But
yes.
Let's pretend that the keyboard hadn't been crippled by QWERTY. It'd be even better for everybody. I think you're going to see similar devices for AR and VR in the future. Devices where they are specialized, where they require training, where there's a high skill ceiling, but they allow you for beyond human, superhuman in levels of input and output. They're not going to be used by everybody. They're not going to be used all the time, but they are going to be used for dedicated, specialized use cases like gaming, like productivity, like CAD modeling, like military combat. And so I'm still very excited about the future of haptics. I don't think that tapping your fingers together is the end game.
I'm always looking for what I call user interface moments. These moments in time when something gets built that transforms the world. So when Andreessen creates Mosaic on top of ARPA, it's a user interface moment. All of a sudden, people can use this incredible, powerful tool. When Steve Jobs created, the App Store, that's a user interface moment. Google was a user interface moment on top of all of the web sites in the world. Do you see the Vision Pro as a user interface moment, a transitional moment in this field, or is it not that significant? Or is it going to create sort of a step change in approaches and usability of the virtual world?
You know, that's actually going to be hard for me to predict, mostly because whether or not it becomes a step change moment is totally up to developers more than Apple. Apple's come up with
I agree with
Apple's
that.
come up with a really powerful UI, but I'm not sure I'm comfortable betting against all of the other developers who are trying to come up with their own schemes. I've seen some other schemes that people have come up with around some crazy ways to interact with computers using VR headsets, and some of them I think are actually have advantages over what Apple is doing. So I'd say what Apple's done is great. I suspect that if someone beats them, they're also going to adapt that. I mean, the App Store is a good example. Mm-hmm. The App Store was not part of the original vision of the iPhone. Steve Jobs was famously anti-native apps. He was all about web apps and not really giving anyone access to the core hardware of the system. One of the people who was actually going toe-to-toe with him on that was John Carmack, who was previously the CTO of Oculus, and before that, obviously, started id Software. He was one of the people who was really aggressively pushing Jobs to allow native applications on the iPhone. And I think I think I had a Nokia N800 mobile internet device running Mamo, and so I had my mobile app repositories on my little Linux device, and I basically had everything that the App Store had years ahead of time. I think Apple in that case, it was one where they got it wrong. And they realized that they had gotten it wrong. And they said, okay, we're going to do the App Store. We're going to copy what a lot of other people have done, but we're going to do it really, really well. And that was transformational. So I guess I would say I'm not convinced that what Apple is showing right now is that step change. Whatever that step change is, though, Apple's going to be on it. I don't think that they're going to be stubborn about using the best.
An extraordinary company. Their MO on just driving to perfection.
That's right.
It's going to be expensive, it's going to be white, and it's going to work really well.
That's right.
Dzięki, to tyle na dzisiaj. Miłego dnia.